Hey guys, and welcome to my channel Appalachian Home Co. In today's video where we are going to be making some scrap wood projects. These are all going to be super easy, great for beginners, and I know because I'm a beginner woodworker and I absolutely loved making all these projects. They were super fun to make, so I think you guys are really going to enjoy this video. You will need some basic tools. I'm going to be using a table saw and a miter saw to make all of these projects, so you will need at least some basic woodworking cutting tools such as that. So we're going to go ahead and jump on into our first project that you can make with scrap wood. Our first scrap wood project is Chevron Wall Art. This is great even if you are a beginner to wood projects, and you can use any kind of wood for these. I'm actually using some scrap 2x4s from another project. These were already cut in half, so I'm just setting up my table saw to cut 3/4 inch strips from these boards. So they are 1.5 inches wide, but any size width will work for this project. The wider your board, the larger your project will actually turn out to be. Now I'm taking the 1.5 inch wide boards to the miter saw and I'm cutting a 45-degree angle on the ends. I'm going to cut pieces that are 1.5 inches long to make the chevron wall sign. You will need 48 pieces for this project, and after cutting them, I am sanding each piece. I should have thought beforehand and just sanded the boards before I cut all of these pieces. That would have saved on a lot of time later. After sanding, these are ready for stain, and I'm using the colors Kona and black. You can lay out any design beforehand and use any combination of colors, stains, or paints that you like, and these are really versatile. The same design that you're using here can be used to create tons of different looks just by switching up the colors. Now I'll be gluing these down onto a 13-inch wide circle that I cut out of some 1/4 inch plywood. I made sure to make the circle big enough to seat all of the wood pieces, but small enough not to be shown after all the pieces were glued down. So you may have to do some pre-assembling to see what size circle you're going to need for this. And I cut this out with my bandsaw, but a jigsaw will work also. I'm just using some regular Titebond 2 to glue up everything, and I'm going to be leaving it to dry for several hours. Project number 2 is wooden keychains. These are such a great idea. You could use virtually all your scrap wood you have to make and sell these items. They are really popular on Etsy and they make great gifts also. I'm using walnut wood scraps to make these, and I'm just going to start by cutting these down with a table saw to 1-inch half strips. My camera died as I was getting ready to film cutting these with the table saw, but these are 1/2 inches by 1/2 inches. And you can make these different sizes or even shapes. I'm going to make these 4 inches long, and I'm going to cut these on the miter saw. When I am cutting small pieces like this on the miter saw, I make sure to let the saw blade slow down almost completely before lifting the blade back up to keep it from flipping those small little pieces back up into the saw. You can also cut these using a small handsaw. Since they're so small, it would take no time at all if the miter saw makes you uncomfortable. Now I'm going to give these another good sanding and just sand those edges I sawed. Hand sanding worked best for these little pieces. The orbital sander was just a little bit too much for these, but this didn't take long at all. I'm just using some 220 grit sandpaper. So again, here I'm adding some custom details with my laser cutter, but if you do not have a laser cutter, this is totally optional. You can actually also add some decals using a Cricut machine or vinyl cutter if you want to add decals that way. But if you want to leave these totally blank and just have a blank plain wooden keychain, they turn out beautiful just like that also. Now for the keychain hardware, you can find hardware on Amazon to complete these. I already had O-rings and these little latches, but I did not have the kit to connect to the wooden part, these little eyelet screws. I'm using a small drill bit about the same size as the screws to pre-drill for these. And you can get these in a picture hanging kit from the dollar store. That is where I actually got these from. I'm also using a little glue, just some Titebond 2 on the ends of the screws to make sure they stay in place. And now we're ready to add the keychain hardware. I got these little blue pliers from Michael's in the jewelry making section. I love these. I use them for everything. It made adding this hardware super easy. Now I'm just adding a finish to these, just some homemade wax that I made from beeswax and mineral oil. I love this scrap wood project. It turned out so great and it was so easy to make, and these are going to make such great gifts this Christmas. For project number 3, I'm going to be making some soap trays. This quickly became one of my favorite projects to make with wood. I had some leftover strips of walnut from making the keychains, so I cut those down to 1/2 inch thick strips, and they are about 3/4 inches wide, so that's the size of strips I'm going to be using for this project. You're going to need 2 4.5 inch pieces and 5 3-inch pieces. The longer strips are going to be for your sides, and the shorter pieces are going to be the cross pieces that your soap is actually going to sit on. I went ahead and sanded all of these little pieces with some 220 grit sandpaper, again by hand, and I am just using a square to make sure that when I assemble these that everything is straight and square. And all I am doing is I am just using some Titebond 3 waterproof wood glue to attach these pieces. I'm starting on the ends, and then I'm just kind of spacing out the middle parts equally to create a little tray. That's it. That's the total project. These were so easy, and I even made some in some leftover scrap cedar, which smelled so good, and it was probably my favorite wood to use for these. So I'm definitely going to be making some more. I already have these sitting out in my house, in my bathroom. So I definitely love these soap trays. The fourth project idea you can use with scrap wood is wooden risers. These can be for candles or to sit your soap dispensers on in your kitchen, but for this project I am using a piece of sawmill lumber. This is scrapped from another project, and it has not been planed, it has not been sanded, and I'm cutting off all of the edges that have some holes and knots in them to get this little rectangular piece of wood. And this wood is about 9 inches by probably about 7 inches. I forgot to measure it, but I'm just going to be using my planer to plane it down. If you already have some milled lumber that is already smooth, then you don't have to worry about this step. Now on my table saw, I'm cutting another piece of sawmill lumber that was from another board. Same kind of lumber. I'm just cutting it down into 2-inch strips. These are going to be for the feet pieces on my candle riser. Now I'm changing the angle on my miter saw to 10 degrees because I'm going to be cutting just a little small bevel on the ends of the legs. I want them to stick out just a little bit differently than just straight legs. You'll see here in a minute what I'm talking about, but I'm going to measure and cut these legs 2 inches long. On the top piece of the wooden riser, I'm going to be using my router to create a smooth chamfer around all of the edges. I'm just using a 1/4 inch chamfer, but this is totally optional. You can also create those smooth edges with some sandpaper with your sander. Just keep sanding those corners down until you have a smooth edge that you like. But I went ahead and used my router, so you can see that gave that a nice smooth edge on all sides. Now I'm going to go ahead and start attaching these. Again, I'm just going to be using some wood glue to attach these. You can nail these, you can screw these, but I just wanted to make this simple, and wood glue actually holds up really well. So I'm just using a little level to make sure that everything is straight and square, and I'm just going to add that wood glue right on there. I'm also going to be using some clamps. So again, if you don't have clamps, you may want to get a large heavy object to hold these down until they are dry. Wood glue usually takes several hours to overnight to completely dry, so just make sure everything is dry. And I had some mineral oil left on my hands. That's what that little spot is on the top of there, but it's okay because that's what I'm going to be finishing it off with. You do want to make sure and remove any glue squeeze out that you have with some sandpaper on any of your projects, because anytime you're adding finish, if you have wood glue left on your project, it will not absorb finish no matter what kind of finish you're using. So if there's any wood glue left, you will definitely be able to tell it. So make sure you use that sandpaper and get rid of all of your glue. So now we're just going to finish this up with some mineral oil again. These candle risers or these wooden risers can be made in any size, any shape that you like. These can be made into circle shapes, but this was a super simple project. I highly suggest that you guys give this one a try. You're going to love it. Project number 5 is cutting boards or charcuterie boards. These are great for using your scrap wood, and I'm using some leftover maple from a local woodworker. I'm cutting these 10-inch long pieces down to about 2.5 inches wide, and I will be gluing them together to create a larger piece for the charcuterie board. I'm just assembling these how I think would look best. I'll be gluing 5 of these together to make the board. These boards are going to be really small, and I'm using a joiner to make the edges super square. Now this step is totally not necessary. You can achieve great results with just a table alone. Now ready to assemble, I'm using some clamps to hold these together. If you don't have any clamps, there are other methods you can use to hold your boards together, such as painter's tape around your boards. If you're making these to sell, I would suggest that you do invest in some clamps. When you're making especially charcuterie boards or cutting boards, you want to make sure the glue squeezes out the joints really well, so you know they are glued together well. And also I'm using some Top Bond 3 glue to glue these together. This is a waterproof glue, so if someone happens to get these wet or wants to wash these, then the glue is going to hold up really well. You want to make sure the glue dries completely, either overnight or at least several hours. You want to make sure the glue dries completely, either overnight or at least several hours. And after they are dry, make sure to scrape off any excess glue before sanding down the top and bottom. For the sanding, another tool I use in my shop is the planer. It creates a really smooth, flat surface really quickly. But again, if you do not have a planer, a good palm sander can achieve similar results. Just give it a good sanding and you can get it down really smooth. Now that the boards are joined together, you can create any shape or pattern you like. Now that you have the boards joined together, you can create any shape or pattern you like. You can cut these down square, but I was selling these at a local craft fair along with some honey. So I make these into a hexagon pattern to go along with a honeybee theme. I just drew out a pattern on the board, and I'm going to be cutting 30-degree angles off the corners to create the hexagon. And now finally I'm sanding down the sharp edges really smooth with around a 240 grit sandpaper. Now at this point, these boards are ready to finish with oil and are ready to go, but if you want to go a step further and you actually have I'm sanding down the sharp edges really smooth with around a 240 grit sandpaper. Now at this point, these boards are ready to finish with oil and are ready to go, but if you want to go a step further and you actually have a laser, then you can create some really neat designs on these. You can add some custom names, custom sayings, like this bee theme design that I wanted to add to match at my craft fair. This is totally not necessary, and as you'll see in just a minute, the boards alone will turn out to be beautiful. These are going to be great items for gifts, great items to sell, or even great items just to keep for yourself in your home. And one step I did not show in this was actually spraying these down with water before I'm placing this oil. If you spray them down with water and let them dry and then give them another quick sanding, you will raise the grain and keep these from getting rough once they are wet after they're oiled. But for some reason I skipped that step on this video, but I'm going ahead and applying the oil to these after I have raised the grain and after these are finished, and you can see how beautiful they turn. This is such a great scrap wood project, simple to do, does not take a lot of time to finish. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. This was such a fun video to make. I love doing projects like this. I hope you enjoyed it too. I love making content like this for you guys. So again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in my next video.